Welcome back to the Mile 40 podcast. The show continues on. And just a quick reminder to all the listeners out there, if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever your platform of choice is. Really want to thank you all for continuing to show up week in and week out. Today's guest is a friend and someone who I'm really excited to have on, Terry White. He is the founder and CEO of WOLACO. He graduated from Harvard in 2012, where he was the captain of the Division I lacrosse team. After 2 years in real estate development, he decided to venture down a path less traveled, and he founded WOLACO. If you know me that I'm a big proponent of WOLACO. If you've bought a copy of Break Barriers, you've seen WOLACO on the cover. I'm also an investor in WOLACO. I believe very deeply in the product. I don't think that if you've seen me out on a run for maybe the last 7-8 years, you've seen me wearing anything that wasn't WOLACO. So, Terry, thanks for joining today.
Of course. Pumped to be here.
Yeah, man. No, I'm really excited to have you here. And I'm excited for my community to learn a little bit more about WOLACO and learn about your journey building it. Because I do get a lot of questions asked about the company, in particular from people who aren't, runners or athletes who, just ask, what is this company that you have on your book? And so let's dive into that. But I think a good place to get started is you graduated college, you worked a little bit in real estate development. I remember meeting you around that period in 2014, 2015, when we were attending those spin classes at Swerve. And I think the idea was just being formulated. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's hard to even start there because I think at that point I had a business, right? I think I had a business. I think we were maybe in the market or just kind of getting into the market. But I think it's important to, I think usually brands like this, businesses like this, and I'd say my brand in particular, it's come from a place of passion. And there's a lot of meaning in my own personal experiences that ultimately, birthed the brand. And I think on a personal level, I was a collegiate athlete. And when I graduated, and I was very passionate about that, like I really loved the sport, I loved the team. And even at a place like Harvard, I was so, an incredible academic institution, but I just got so excited and passionate about the sport. And I think when I graduated, in a lot of ways, it was difficult to fill that void with traditional career tracks. And as a person, I just found, I think entrepreneurship in a way filled that void. I just became very excited by the prospect of being able to create something myself from scratch. And in those years when I was dabbling in real estate and more traditional career tracks, I started to become very passionate about active lifestyle. And most importantly, the profound impacts that it had on me as a human. As a young, kind of wide-eyed kid out of college, I was ambitious. And I started to realize that if I could put these habits into practice, I'm sharper. I'm waking up with energy and getting to work, and I'm more effective. I'm better to the people in my life that I care about. And I just became kind of obsessed with these profound impacts. And then it was kind of serendipitous that on a morning run, leaving my apartment in the city, I didn't have a convenient place to store my apartment keys, cash, phone, most importantly. And I came up with the idea to put sweat-proof pockets on compression shorts. And when I had that idea, the stars aligned because I was developing really strong passions and opinions about lifestyle, about how I wanted to live my life, and how I thought more people should be living their lives. And at the time, I even thought about, maybe I should go train people personally. And learn how to do that because I want to help people in this capacity. But I just kept coming back to this idea of, well, if I could build a brand and a business, then I can impact many, many more people kind of simultaneously by creating meaning through that brand. So when I had the idea for the product, for me, that was what I thought, this could be the catalyst, because I have this problem where I don't have a place to store things. And a lot of other guys like myself probably are having the same problem.
At that point in time, a lot of times we have these serendipitous moments and we come up with these ideas. But a lot of people kind of take a step back, because in that very moment, if it was me, I'd be asking myself, what do I know about retail? And the answer is, I know nothing. What did you know about retail in that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate it now more than ever that, naivete is powerful and actually can be used to your advantage. And I think especially when you're younger and you have kind of that hunger and that energy. But I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know anything about retail. I had some opinions about design. I've always been a creative person, but not in any extreme way. I mean, AP art in high school, studied art history in college, and had kind of an eye for design. But I like to build things. I built kind of my college coffee table and summer projects and woodworking, that sort of thing. So I had that gene in my body for creating. And at the end of the day, building an apparel product versus a coffee table, not that different. But you have to you gotta learn by just kind of jumping into the fire, and that's what I did.
What was the first step to getting the business rolling?
The first step for me, actually, at the time, we were obsessed with this idea of, compression shorts with pockets. No one's really done it. But have they? Right? Like, as far as we knew, they hadn't. Right? So the first step was patent, and this is what I learned through, talk to a lawyer. One of my best friend's dad's a lawyer, so we had some conversations with him, and he directed us to the IP team at his firm. And you run a test, you run a search. Is there anything out there that does this? It's competitive. It's going to preclude you from entering the market. And the answer is no. And then also you just kind of study the market. A lot of Googling, make sure that nothing out there exists. But realistically, like, even if there were a few other competitive products out there, like, it wouldn't really have been that big of a deal. But that's that, like, fear of, like, to your point, like, your kind of insecurities kind of talking back at you. Like, you can't do this. Someone else is doing it. You're not allowed to do it. Someone has a patent. But that was the first step to kind of, once we broke through that, then it was Google. How do I make a garment? And I actually found a company in Minnesota, just a small shop of, like, pretty much like seamstresses, designers that actually built this business model where they would go out and work with entrepreneurs like myself, people who had ideas but didn't have the technical expertise. So I spent a year mailing product samples back and forth with Minnesota. So I'd go to work, come home from work in the evening, with the expectation that prototype might be waiting with my doorman. Run the doorman, and fired up to open it up, and that was one of the cool things about it all, is that, like, I was just kind of, like, thriving, being kind of that young, wide-eyed, ambitious kid who had just graduated, played college sport. Now the world is my oyster, and in a lot of ways, like, my active routine and, like, running, that's when all of that came alive. Like, that's when I was the most fired up. Like, kind of walk out my apartment, run along, I'm running the West Side Highway. I don't have class tomorrow. Like, I'm a free man, and I'm prototyping this product that I'm now wearing and testing. So it's this very, kind of, to your point, like, it's like the synergistic experience that was pretty powerful. And I did that, feedback over email, never spoke to them on the phone once.
Huh.
And you get that, and that's what got us to kick like our first pre-sale.
Got
And
it.
then you meet people and you go and find more sophisticated channels and suppliers and that sort of thing.
Starting from scratch here. I know you kind of alluded to your Kickstarter campaign. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that went?
Yeah, I mean, I think tied to that process that I've gone through, it was pretty scrappy. I've just always been scrappy, but and like tracks back to even the way that I like played sports. It's just kind of was my personality. But I had a friend who really got me onto the concept of the lean startup. And this is just a kind of a thesis at that time, which it's kind of changed. It's changed quite a bit because there's been this crazy rise of venture capital over the past decade. That's just been, it is like unprecedented. The rate at which venture capital has been flowing into businesses. But like 8 years ago, it wasn't anywhere near where it is now. And it was at that time that there's just this idea of, you're not necessarily launching a rocket ship, you're driving a car. So you can try something and you can turn at low cost and then like try something new and then turn, and you kind of wind your way into to your business that you then want to, maybe pour a little bit of funding and go faster after the fact. But so, that's why we actually launched a small pre-sale ourselves. And the mentality was like, why raise money when we can just sell the product? And Kickstarter was very popular at the time. So consumers were getting comfortable with this idea that, I'll pay, fund the product, and then I'll receive it several months later. And I'll trust that entrepreneur. So we capitalized on that and got our product to a point where we're comfortable putting it into the market. And I actually had a friend who had become a little bit of an advisor for me at that time. And, I had been prototyping for over a year. And I showed him a sample. It's like the, 15th sample. And he's in my apartment. And he's like, look, this is good. Like, you're like, what are you waiting for? Like, just put this in front of people, sell it. Stop over, being a perfectionist. And again, it's part of that fear, because I think one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur is you're effectively pouring your guts out into the world.
Yeah.
Like, I created this. I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this.
You're right. As much as I'm wearing WOLACO, I'm really wearing Carrie White as well. Like, that's kind of like,
yeah.
I mean, not a lot of people would see it that way if they don't know you, but the way that I see it, every time I put on a pair of shorts or a Clinton tank, there's, if something goes wrong, nothing has gone wrong for the listeners out there, but if something goes wrong, I'd be thinking Terry. So
yeah. Yeah. And we all have that insecurity. Like, I think it's just human nature that when you create something and then you go out and you share it with the world, it's scary. It's a scary moment. So sometimes you procrastinate on just putting it out there. So finally we did, and we had a very successful campaign.
I can't help but put on my Shark Tank brain here, because obviously the show has taken off over the last 10 years, if not more. I don't know how long it's been on now, but I could just imagine Kevin O'Leary looking at this product when it first came out, saying that, like a Nike or an Adidas is going to annihilate you and going to create the same exact thing, and they have the money, and I'm sure that thought went through your mind back then. Can you walk me through a little bit, like how you tackled that, approached that, and did it scare you at the very beginning?
Yeah, no, it actually did. And I think I was always anchored by a long-term vision. Like, I think that's largely what's in many, many different ways, what's allowed me to persist through the bumps in the road. And even in a situation like that, that's part of the reason, we did get a design patent on our first short. And I'd say there's definitely a lot of validity to the idea of being a first mover, and moving fast. And I think, but I don't think that, I think we give too much credit to the big guys to just kind of eat our lunch in situations like that, because there's the kind of disruptor mentality and approach is to take what you do and just do it better than they're willing to do it.
Yeah.
And kind of continuing to innovate in and around that, because chances are they don't have the time, the energy, or the willingness to even add that little extra cost to those products. Yeah. They're more interested in going the opposite direction, actually stripping out cost.
Yeah.
I think that's where we've ultimately been able to kind of win at what we do best. And then of course, right, like, you build a strong brand that has meaning, that can stand alone. And that's really ultimately the difference maker over the long term.
Did you know early on that you wanted to become a premium product, or were you thinking more about how can you get this in as many hands as possible early on in the process? And did you have to iterate to get to where you are right now?
It's a good question, because I think especially when as a first-time entrepreneur, you're nowhere near as polished as I would be now in terms of thinking about the business, premium versus not. Like, I had an idea for product and innovation, and I was an athlete and I wanted to build an athletic brand. I didn't think too much about where we really wanted to settle into and just kind of the overall market, early on at least. But I think I would definitely say that I've always had I've always had a vision for building a brand that's definitely on the premium end of the spectrum. Like, deep down, when I think about it and I think about kind of what my vision was early, has always been a lot of my inspiration actually early on came from living down in Tribeca with a couple of friends in a 1-bedroom apartment where we just put up a T-wall, and I was able to actually reverse commute out to New Jersey. But it was important for me to live in New York City because I could start to incubate this concept on the side. If I'm in New York, I can get coffee on weekends and grab a beer with somebody to talk about product development or whatever. But yeah, so it was never the first thing on my mind, but I think subconsciously the fact that I lived inspired by Tribeca specifically and New York City, and kind of the buzz and the energy of kind of that ambitious lifestyle, which in a lot of ways I think has kind of pulled us into that premium pocket of consumers, and no pun intended, but like pocket, because our products are not, products are not cheap, but at the same time, it's we're not buying. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Like, we're not buying cheap fabric. We're not buying cheap materials, and it's, that's the way it goes.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And for the listeners out there, for context, if you guys were to look at the WOLACO website, you'd notice that a lot of the gear is named after streets here in Manhattan, specifically near in and around Tribeca. And so that's some context for the listeners there, so they understand the roots there. So we talked a little bit about, how things get started. And, I know, knowing you over the last several years, that it wasn't necessarily the most direct path to where you are today. And there was a lot of learning moments along the way. So let's kind of just walk through the journey a little bit, from like 2015 up until COVID, if you can give us just a a little update on how the business grew then.
Yeah, I think for us in the early years, we, again, tracking back to my mindset around kind of the lean startup and really taking that very literally. We relied heavily on organic growth tactics. And in a lot of ways, I've always wanted to build an authentic brand. That's a word that's always been extremely important to me. And sometimes what that means is like really putting your actions where your mouth is. And so as a result, we were able to, one of the things that I think being in New York City, especially over that span of time, 2015 to up to 2020, was one of the more exciting, I think, periods of time here in the city, especially surrounding wellness, active lifestyle, and really just the industry surrounding it. And New York City became the hub. If you wanted to be a fitness instructor and wanted to be the best, that's where you would go. You move in from middle America, and you go and you give it your shot. And it's the same idea with like boutique fitness concepts. You go to New York, and that's where the critical mass is, and you try to make it work. And then you expand into the different markets thereafter. So there's a really incredible buzz that I think we were able to tap into and be a part of. So lots of partnerships with influencers locally, and then also different fitness concepts. And then we launched what I believe was one of the biggest and definitely kind of a pioneer in the world of like community fitness concepts, called WOLACO Wednesday, which really just started as a something I would do with like an employee or two, and then my friends and some like close friends of the brand. And on Wednesdays we go and we do kind of like a body weight kind of boot camp style circuit at the Pier 25 in Tribeca. And we started to build momentum. So, internally at the company, we said, let's do this every Wednesday, and let's bring in some great fitness talent and fitness instructors that align with the brand, that have good energy, and let's have them run the workouts. And it was a very kind of mutually beneficial partnership, because it was a zero budget activation, other than our time, which is valuable and expensive. But and then the fitness instructor would have great exposure to a pocket of like-minded people in New York City, and then we would capture a lot of content, and we grew this by showing up consistently for a couple of years. I'd say 2018, 2019, consistently. And then in the winter, we would go into different boutique studios in New York City. So we built a really nice email list and community in New York. At the max, we were seeing 200, maybe even gotten close to 250 at one of our biggest events out on the turf in Tribeca, people. And it was fun. But a lot of energy. And again, I think like even in that process, I learned that running a business like mine is a digitally native business. There are other ways to grow that do not require all of the energy of your entire team every week. So the pandemic hit, and it was an opportunity for me to like do a little bit of reorganizing. But what we learned, and the growth that we experienced from that kind of activation is invaluable. It served its purpose, but it also created meaning for the brand. And we have carried it forward but we're actually in the process of figuring out how to like repackage it to be something that we can do sustainably, and also maybe even bigger in select scenarios and environments moving forward.
Yeah, there's building community is tricky, right? Like, and actually, there's a guest coming on the show who wrote a book called The Business of Belonging, and it's all about building communities as a business. And from a bottom line perspective, it's not black and white with regards to the translation of building community, whether it be digitally or in person or however it's done, to how it translates to the overall well-being and growth and sustainability of the business. Undoubtedly, I think the one thing is that community is important, but it's clear that you guys have taken it to yourselves to assess how to go about creating that community in a way that's sustainable for the longer term of the business. Throughout that period, that activation period, look, on the outside, I was very present throughout all that. I saw everything that you were doing. And as a community member, it was a lot of fun. But again, I wasn't on the inside of the business. So I'm interested, someone on the inside of the business, and in particular, you as the CEO, what were some of the challenges during that 4 or 5 year period that you had to kind of face, especially as you started to see people embrace, WOLACO Wednesdays, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, maybe I need to figure out a way to restructure this?
I mean, that's a really good question. At times, right, it was euphoric. It's exactly what I wanted to be doing, and it's exactly. It's humbling to see that many people showing up for these workouts. The majority of them probably didn't even know who I was, right? So it was like kind of cool to just be in the thick of it with like 200 people that are just like there for a free workout and there for the energy, but like, and I'm just there doing it with them, and they have literally no idea that it's my company. So it was, very humbling in that regard, and sometimes actually like just like weird, but so it euphoric for a lot of reasons, but at the same time, I think there were moments where, and I think it's just like pretty classic entrepreneurial experience, but there were things weighing on my mind, right? Which is what happens to entrepreneurs, whether it's related to money, or even like performance. Maybe we're in a performance slump. And I feel that more than anyone. And, more than my team, and obviously people that have absolutely no idea what's going on behind the hood. So, you have this you set the standard. And I honestly, I think I missed one WOLACO Wednesday when I was like traveling, maybe like 2 when I was like traveling, but I was just very stubborn about showing up for like every single one, and I wouldn't give myself a break. But yeah, so there are times when you're there and there's, you're dealing with some troubles internally. And even to your point, like towards the end, where, I probably started to realize how much energy it required. And on top of it, I'd say going into 2020, like even before the pandemic hit, we were in a little bit of a tricky financial spot. The turn of a new year, thinking about, we're in a tough spot here. We spent a lot of energy on this like activation concept. Maybe we need to be a bit more calculated about where that energy goes and what we get back in return as a business. Yeah. So, I think ultimately that's one of the biggest, and this is something that became kind of a theme. It's funny how things happen, right? Like, it became a theme even through the year of 2020 when I had a lot more headspace. The world kind of stopped.
Yeah.
Afforded me that time to do a bit of construction and thinking. And one of the big themes was, okay, energy in and return on that energy. And how can we measure those things?
Hey all, it's me, Bishoy. As a marathon runner and endurance athlete, I've come to understand the importance of properly fueling your body for preparation and recovery. Every day, you get a shot at success. How you start your day typically paints a picture of what the rest of the day will look like. Start your day with a super convenient, healthy, and delicious nutritional win. Meal 1 by Kreatures of Habit. Overnight oatmeal packed with 30 grams of plant-based protein, chia, flax, and pumpkin seeds. Vitamin D3, omega-3s, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes made in under 1 minute. Stop wasting time or worrying about what to eat as your first meal of the day. Start with meal 1. Visit creaturesofhabit.com, creatures spelled with a K, and use code MILE40 for 15% off a one-time purchase or the first subscription order payment. Before we dive into 2020 and COVID, when you first were thinking about the idea of WOLACO, right? And you thought you had a product that you could sell out there. You realized that, or you were energized by the idea of being an entrepreneur and being able to promote this idea of an active lifestyle. Obviously, this was going to be your first go at being a CEO and a founder. Were you more enthralled by the idea of building a product to help the masses? And did you at that point think about what it would be like to run a company if things went well, knowing that, all of a sudden you were going to have to manage an external community, you were going to have to manage internal stakeholders, meaning the people that will be reporting to you, you were going to have to manage investors, you were going to have to fundraise. Did you take all that into account? And I'm guessing the answer, like, you learned a lot along the way. But what I'm trying to kind of get at here is, as a CEO, what was really driving you? Was it, putting the message out there, pushing an active lifestyle, seeing people empowered, or was it about, growing a massive company and eventually, selling it off, or whatever your exit strategy will be?
Well, I guess one thing I would say is, well, maybe kind of like two questions there. One, like, the first thing I'd say is definitely was not thinking about what the weight of what I would have to carry across, the business, from the front end of the brand and the product all the way to the back end and the financials and everything, all the responsibility that goes into it. Like, of course not, especially since I, as a first-time entrepreneur, it's very difficult to, unless you've gone to some kind of special curriculum, entrepreneurship and business. But definitely not. And I think what I've learned, probably, in the past, like 2 years, like 2 or 3 years, that there's a major difference between being like a founder entrepreneur and a CEO. And I think, one of the most important things to do as your business starts to get bigger and like you kind of get over that, a little bit of that inflection period, is to start thinking more like a CEO. And, largely what goes along with that is being able and willing, or making it a necessity that you bring people in around you that are genuinely better than you at those particular areas, because it's impossible for one person to be the best at, at all of these different things. And at the end of the day, it's your time. Your time is finite. So yeah, I think really one of the things I've really become better at is like just taking it to heart. I think early on as an entrepreneur, you have a little bit of hubris, because you've created this thing from scratch. And, the idea of someone understanding your vision better than you is like doesn't really make sense. But then, eventually, the sooner you can get over that hump and say, yeah, like I need all the experts.
Yeah.
Like everywhere.
Yeah.
You're only doing yourself a favor. As a founder, it lifts, personally, I think all founders are a little different, but like for me, I'm more product and brand. So that lifts me up if I've got great people in the right places to go and focus on the things that I'm really good at. So I can drive the brand, drive the business and the product forward and evolve it. So yeah, I think there might have been a second part to that, but I'm forgetting where I wanted to go.
The second part of the question was really around when you started this, did you want, based on where your interests were, did you want to really just kind of focus on the mission around lifestyle? And was that the vision, or was it, like a CEO vision of, I want this thing to scale and I want this thing to get to a point where, financially, however you want to exit, whatever that is, that was the goal. And did that change along the way?
Yeah. So I've always definitely been, perhaps to an extreme, more about the long-term purpose of what we're building, the impact that I wanted to have on people and customers, and less. I always say, like, it's the business has very organic origin, and compared to someone who maybe went to like a Stanford, came out of a Stanford incubator, where like the exit is built into the initial business plan. My mindset was always like, let's build something of meaning. It's make it big. Like I want to do this for a long time. I'm not even really thinking about that, because if we build something of meaning that's valuable to people, someone will want to buy it at some point. So yeah, I definitely took that to an extreme, and I think particularly through the past few years, I've realized that that's all good and well, but like business is a business, and you can't create that meaning, and you can't have that impact on people if your business can't survive, right? So it's important to really think about it that way. And, so I've definitely shifted my mentality. I think you can absolutely have both, but, and that, kind of ties into thinking more like a CEO, putting milestones in place and, working back against those milestones to drive the business forward. And ultimately, if the business grows, we can reach more people, and have greater impact. And that's also perspective that I gained on community building, right? Like we've got great products. People fall in love with the products. How can we get more products in more people's hands? And then, that's the foundation of our community. It's people that they need to have, it's helpful if they can have the product. So yeah, learned a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's pick up now from COVID, right? So we talked about the build up to 2020, and for background for the listeners out there was no physical store, so everything you were doing was selling online, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we had a like a live work setup, where we would run it as a showroom occasionally, and then pop-ups here and there. One large pop-up in particular, but yeah, for the most part, no. We didn't have a lease on a retail space.
So when COVID hit, one might think that from the outside, but again, me sitting there as someone who decided once March 2020 hit, I was going to start running 100-mile months because all of a sudden now I had all this extra time. I was thinking to myself, wow, this must be great for a company like WOLACO, because if I'm thinking like this, maybe other people are thinking like this, and that means a lot of sweating and a lot of I'm going to need a lot of backup gear right here. But was that the case?
Not right away, but it was really interesting to see. I mean, as I alluded to before, we were in a precarious position to start the year, and so yeah, I think it was probably the what the right word is, but like the first time I really thought, maybe this is it, right? Which, you know, I have a very like fierce kind of,
Yeah.
I'll figure things out. Like we're gonna, you know, so to truly get into that, and I was young enough that like I never really like the fear of failing, was never grave to me. Like I never felt how grave that can actually feel. And I'd say for the first time, getting started 2020, I actually had those feelings, and then the world stopped on top of it. So, you know, you had like a week there where we were already in a difficult place. And, you know, on top of it, I founded the business, really launched the business in 2015. And we've been riding a nice, you know, economic growth track,
Yep.
right? Like the economy had never experienced really any serious downturn over that span of time. So, you know, we hadn't been tested in that capacity. So, you know, as far as and you hear, you know, at that point, you heard horror stories of, you know, companies that had to, you know, not even real estate business, just businesses that were wiped out in, you know, 2008.
Absolutely.
It's bad timing. So, you know, in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, here we go. There's a downturn. This is it. Like, I don't know how we're gonna, you know, and you saw your kind of online sales and site traffic start to just kind of dip. And we ended up, so we ended up kind of in this limbo period for a week, and everyone kind of started to move into like remote living situations, and then kind of in the following weeks, things started to change, and sales started to pick up. And, you know, like, and you know, as time went on, you learn that people similar to you were, I think, in a state of like health being so important and the heightened awareness around that. And just, I don't know, like just the existential like crisis that we're all in. Like, I think it's telling about kind of the human condition that we gravitate towards taking care of ourselves, right? When shit hits the fan, even when things might be bad, you might lose your job. Like, okay, crap, I'm gonna go, like, I'm gonna take care of number one here. I'm gonna invest in myself. That's all I've got, and that's all that matters. I think you saw a lot of that, and obviously other factors, shopping online, and you know, people going home with a little suitcase, and then, you know, not having enough clothes for the week. So yeah, so you know, we saw sales pick up, and it effectively saved the business. And I can't describe it as anything other than like a gift, because not only did it lift sales, but the world stopped. So even if I was in like a precarious financial situation, maybe with like a vendor or something, I had flexibility all of a sudden.
Yeah.
There was like grace. So I was able to navigate and kind of retool certain things. And there's time for me to like kind of do the construction on my own. And yeah, you know, business was profitable throughout the year, but still very, very, very difficult. A lot of difficult things and decisions that were made, but you know, that was part of becoming profitable, was making hard decisions while we had a little bit of a lift from just the universe.
Was that period to date the more difficult period you've had to deal with from running the business?
Yeah, I think it has to be. Yeah, I think it has to be. There continue to be challenges. It's even right now is not the best environment to be operating, running a startup, because a lot of what I alluded to around kind of the rise of venture capital has actually kind of hit its boiling point. I think the bubble has kind of popped a little bit on that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely feel we're more in control, and largely because of the experiences that we went through in 2020. But yeah, I would say that that was definitely the most difficult period of time, both in business, but just emotionally, just like gut wrenching.
Yeah, I mean that's where I was going to go next, around like you know how to lead emotionally, right? And so again, you are an athlete. You have the leadership skills like innately in you, but I think that even throughout this podcast, people need to understand like the ups and downs were constant throughout the last several years. It wasn't like waves of like 3-4 months good, 3-4 months bad. It was like I have to imagine like every day or every other day there was probably something else popping up that was probably taking you in a different direction. And so, did you feel prepared to lead the business and the team, or what the team was at that point emotionally, throughout that? Like, for example, we had Eric Posner on a previous episode, and he talks about what they went through with Swerve during COVID, and some of the obligations he felt he had toward his team, and how he approached it during that period. I'd love to dig into, how equipped you felt you were to lead emotionally, take business aside.
I mean, to your earlier point, there have been a lot of difficult periods leading up to that point. So I'd had to stomach some, pretty just intense things over the years. And so, I kind of knew how to go there. And in many instances, you're getting on a Zoom with the team, you're putting on a pretty face, not being disingenuous in any way, but still like strong, right? Acknowledging the realities of the situation, but like strong, and we confident that there's a way, right? There's a way out. I mean, yeah, to your point though, like even just as an example of things that I've been through, even leading up to that point, I had plenty of like financial challenges, and I really think that money is probably one of the hardest, at least just personally, when in a difficult money situations. I think there are very few things that like affect the human condition, at least for me, than that. But in 2019, the fall of 2019, we actually went to, we made it all the way to the final. We made it all the way to film day for Shark Tank.
That's right. I remember that. Yes.
And again, this is September 2019. Yeah. So then we run into some kind of financial troubles there at the end of the year. Then it's 2020. So, back to back to back. And I had decided, and I had never really put my hat in the ring for Shark Tank. This was the first time a producer had kind of come through. Huh. And I was like, yes, this could be, there's, Shark Tank is kind of it's like the modern day Oprah. Yep. It's the only real program that has that much viewership that could really drive that much impact for consumer business. Yeah. And so in my mind, it was worth taking a run at it. But there's a lot of sacrifice really just in like your energy and your time to prepare for it. It takes a lot of preparation. And nothing is guaranteed. Yeah. So you get like, there's probably like 5 big milestones throughout the process. Yeah. And you can be cut at any point in time. And then even if if and when you do film an episode of Shark Tank, they don't need to air it.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right.
So it's a complete gamble. And I knew that it was, but we made it all the way to filming, the day of filming. So we were scheduled to film the sharks, film in front of the sharks, an episode. And the way they do it is they've got 10 slots in a day, but really they only have time for like 9.
Okay.
So they throw on the 10th for some extra content, because each of these filming periods go anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour. And then they edit it down to like 5 minutes. So we were scheduled 10th. We didn't really know we had maybe heard, because we talked to some other people, that the 10th wasn't the best place to be. But partially just because the sharks would be cranky and tired at the end of the day. So, we go through everything, hair and makeup. We did a pre-pitch to the entire production team, and then they scheduled us, and go throughout the entire day and watch people go and come back from the set, like crying and happy and whatever. And then it's our turn to go up, and we're supposed to be picked up by a golf cart, but instead the producer comes to us on a golf cart, and she just says, so this is the worst part of my job, but we ran out of time.
Oh, wow.
So it's the last day filming for that season. And literally on our way out, like literally we had a whole set design, pack up the set into a car, and we had to go get our car. They weren't going to, arranging any kind of transportation. There's like, sorry, see ya. Oh, and then we're like driving out, and we see like Kevin O'Leary and Mark Cuban walking over to the production party. They have like a party at the end of this season. We're like, okay, great, have fun. Anyway, so you've been through a lot, but I've been, lots of things happen. And that in itself was like such a hollow feeling at the end of that. So yeah, I've been through these like, oh my God, moments, and but in 2020 it was definitely a different animal, and I'd say more deeply than ever I've questioned myself, my capabilities. Am I really capable? Like, I've been doing this for 5 years at that point. Like, am I what I thought I was? So yeah, it's difficult, but I think, that's fortunately, I think I'm wired in a way. And I think, many entrepreneurs are, that when those things happen, you kind of like, it sucks. And then you use that feeling to propel you into kind of like a competitive mindset. I'll show you. In a lot of ways, that's kind of what I did. And I was great. In a way, I was grateful of this time. I was like, oh my God, I have this time to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like I was gifted that.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing that Shark Tank story, because I didn't know that. I knew something didn't work out, but I didn't realize that's what happened. And like, I'm personally a believer that when things like that happens, it's essentially the universe telling you that your time is coming. Like, it's not right now, but your time is coming. And maybe you were saved from something, essentially,
Sure.
by not having it happen then. On a lighter note, I got to ask, was the pitch going to be entertaining? Did it?
Yeah. It would have been good. I mean, I think, to your point, like we had a team that would have been on stage, and it could have gone a lot of different ways. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
So, we might have been saved in some capacity. But, often making things interesting that's good television. So I do think if we got out there, for better or worse, we probably would have gotten an episode on to air, if we were in.
I had to imagine, based on what I know of who the cast may have been, I had to imagine between you and everyone else, that had to have been a good show for the Sharks. We're about to round things up, and so I just want to ask you: you're approaching 10 years now. How proud are you of what you've built? And if there's one potential shortcoming that you're kind of like, looking to either lean into or really focus on, what would you say that is?
I'm proud. I, definitely never. Yeah, I think as a like someone, especially through my college days, like I really didn't know what I want to do, where I might be. But I always had kind of a feeling that I go and try and do something different. And I'm really proud that I've been able to at least kind of pave my own way and like express myself. I think that's a big part of this for me, is like an expression of what I believe in. Um, and I'm just the kind of person that if I had to suppress that in a different kind of suppress my purpose and what those things that I believe in, to go and do something more traditional, I just would never be whole. But it's also not to say that like you can't, there are ways to find that purpose that aren't tied to your career. And I think that's something that I've definitely come to appreciate later. But I think early on, especially, like I always was very fixated on this idea that like whatever I do professionally, like needs to be so closely aligned with who I am and what I care about, which I think moving forward, I'll have a different perspective on that just in life generally. Because it's also can be tricky when you intertwine those two things. Your livelihood's based on something that you care so deeply about. But yeah, I think, but as it relates to like where I'm at, I think my biggest thing is probably a little bit more of what we've talked about, doing more of what we've talked about, which is like really being a CEO, continuing to make the right, like hard business decisions and surrounding myself with really smart people who have been through it, that can help me do that fast. So that time doesn't pass and that we're, thinking about it, retroactively. So, just professionalizing, bringing smart people in and around me. We built a really strong brand. We got great supporters, and just want to keep building up the business for those people that believe in, that believe in it.
Love that. Last question I have for you today. What did you learn in those darker moments of this trajectory, that you're going to really kind of lean into, and whether it's something that you learned about yourself as a leader, something you learned about running a business, something that you learned about managing, different stakeholders. What have you learned that you could kind of advise someone out there, whether it be something about yourself, who is probably where you were in 2014, 2015, coming up with an idea right now that they're not sure they want to bring to the masses?
There'd probably be some mix between, some mix between people, like again, like the people that, how you build your team, and just how you assemble. I would weigh in on kind of the importance of bringing, maybe not hiring emotionally, hiring out of, utility and fit, but not in an overly emotional way, because that is going to make, as the business grows, as the stakes get higher, then you've got this kind of fuzzy middle ground that make it harder for you to make decisions and operate the business. And then the other thing would just be that think about the business from the ground up. I think usually if you're anything like me, there will be no shortage of passion, right? And kind of that vision, like that's going to be there, but get into the weeds, understand the fundamentals, sooner than later.
Awesome. Terry, thank you so much, man. It was a pleasure having you on today. A lot of good insight from you on just your trajectory personally and how you built this company from the ground up. And again, to all the listeners out there, understand that, I firmly believe in WOLACO and everything that they're doing. It's a company that I hold very dearly with regards to my mission. And I really just want to say thank you for coming on today, Terry.
Awesome. Thank you. And I haven't had a ton of time to share. I haven't reflected enough on some of these times. So I'm happy I had the opportunity to do it.
Absolutely.